It's sort of the driving force of innovation and economic growth. And before I came up with this idea, I mean, there was a lot of really smart people thinking about this change from an industrial society, you know, an old, blue-collar, manufacturing-driven, steel and autos kind of economy, to a post-industrial economy. And people like Dan Bell, the great sociologist at Columbia and then at Harvard, wrote a lot about this. And then, of course, Peter Drucker, you know, probably one of the greatest, probably the greatest management thinker of all time, kind of dubbed this group of people, him and a guy named Fritz Malchuk in the 50s, dubbed this group of people knowledge workers. And the idea was that people work with knowledge, they accumulate knowledge. Economists talked about developing education and human capital. And I was living in Pittsburgh at the time, teaching at Carnegie Mellon, and I was looking at, just like you and others, developments in the internet and technology. And I noted this kind of thing with content and software. And then I began to see the role of arts and music. And I remember going to England one time, and this guy asked me a question about software development and biotech clusters. I looked at him, I said, who are the richest people in England? Well, he's like, that's Paul McCartney and Mick Jagger. So I said, there's something with arts and music and entertainment and something with technology, something with knowledge workers. What do they all have in common? And one day, I was reading some psychology, and they were talking about human creativity. This guy, Rob Sternberg, wrote, if you're an entrepreneur or a business leader, an artist or a musician, a designer, something like that, you're a creative person. I said, oh my God. Maybe it's not just a knowledge class or a post-industrial class. Maybe the thing that links these people together, like the blue-collar worker used physical labor in the factory, maybe the thing that links these people together is their creativity. So we went back and we counted them with a great group of researchers at Carnegie Mellon. And we first counted them across cities. And then we said, we're going to go back 100 years and count this group of people. And what we saw is that over the past 100 years, but certainly since 1980, this group was really expanding. And just to give folks the numbers, between 1980 and today, even with the crisis, we added 20 million new jobs in the creative sector of the economy. That's science, technology, arts, entertainment, filmmaking, design, and then the knowledge workers, right? Healthcare practitioners, lawyers, those financial people who caused part of this problem. And in the United States, that's about a third of the workforce, more or less. And this creative class, even though they make up a third of the workforce, if you add up all the wages and salaries we pay in the United States, and you divide it into three groups, right? The manufacturing working class, the people who do services, lower end services, you know, wait on you in restaurants, sell you your clothes, take care of your house. And then the creative class. The creative class already accounts for more than 50%. And the other thing, just for folks watching, we've actually tracked the unemployment situation, and it's quite devastating in some respect. While the overall US unemployment rate is 10%, and while manufacturing workers have unemployment rates of 15%, and in some parts, like extraction and construction, 25%, the creative class is about 5%. So the creative class has never seen great swings. I mean, that's up from 2% before, but it's never seen these great volatility and swings that really devastate manufacturing. And so I think as we come out of this crisis, we're going to again see that this group is more stable, this group of jobs is more stable, and they're going to grow again. The crisis is kind of the inflection point or the transformation point. You know, if you look back at the two previous crises, and I'm actually writing a book on this, it's called The Great Reset. Hopefully you'll invite me back to talk about it when it comes out in April or May. But if you look back on previous crises, they've always been associated with the rise of new economic systems. So the crisis of 1873 was associated with the rise of, you know, the first industrial revolution, and it gave rise to the second. The crisis of the 1930s was the rise of the second industrial revolution and these big steel companies and auto companies. And then we figured out how to make the society work. This is really a crisis, not just of financial markets and wanted spending and too much credit. It's a tectonic crisis that's associated with the rise of a new economic order. And what we were doing is because we didn't know how to invest in it, we were speculating like wild and money was flowing into real estate. So the creative economic revolution has really been going on, in my view, since the 60s. And it's funny because I went back and looked at this, and folks might not know this, but what I really wanted to be in life was a guitar player. So all my childhood, I spent playing guitar and trying to sound like Jimi Hendrix or Jeff Beck with some degree of non-success. But in the 60s, we saw all of this creative revolution, and even before that, jazz in the 50s, before, but the beat revolution, and then the 60s thing happening in New York. And I just read the fabulous book on Warhol and the Velvet Underground. Mm-hmm. So, you know, you can see this stuff building up as people are tired of and kind of blanching at the strictures of the old organization man society. And it's kind of, you know, it's kind of why we're all fascinated by Mad Men, I think. You know, you see this transformation, this kind of pivot point, right, running through as Mad Men develops. and this creative thing emerging, but people don't know what to do. And so the one way I kind of view the 1960s is this giant temper tantrum, right? Creative people just saying, I'm not going to take it anymore, mom and dad. I want to grow my hair long. I want to grow a beard. I want to go to California. I want to listen to new kind of music. This explosion in art. But it wasn't really hinged to the economy. In the book, I said it, Woodstock wasn't the signal event of the creative revolution. Silicon Valley is. And so I think what happened almost at the same time is these people who were tired of working in the big companies, innovators, some people working at IBM and General Electric, Bell Labs, said, no, we have all this cool stuff we want to make, all this interesting stuff we want to make. The company's very bureaucratic. It's not paying attention to us. Somehow they found their way out to the San Francisco Bay Area and began to build these enterprises that they owned and controlled, right? They began to devise new structures and new forms. And actually, Peter, my entire early research career, well before I came to any ideas of the creative class, was trying to figure out what Silicon Valley was. I wrote a book in 1990 about this called The Breakthrough Illusion. In any event, I think those structures began to take hold. And this new group of people who had the ideas began to be seen as more economically valuable. And what's happened over the past 20 or 30 years, as manufacturing has been offshored and outsourced and moved to the BRICS, but particularly China. I think in the advanced countries like the United States or Canada or Scandinavia or Northern Europe, this creative input, this idea input, this mental labor has become more important. So I see this shift as big as and fundamental as the shift, that Marx wrote about when we move from a feudal or agricultural society to a modern industrial economy and society. I see this shift kind of the same way. We're moving from an older industrial society where value was created by physical labor and raw materials to a new kind of society and economy where value raw materials and physical labor and agriculture are still important. We need to eat and drive things and we need homes, but this mental value added, this creative labor is becoming more important. So that's why I think this is a big revolution on the order of the transformation from an agrarian society to an industrial economy and society.